Do not disturb. Great. Thanks to be here for the session about chopping the monolith. I'm Nicolas Fränkel, and yeah. Now it's my turn not to work. Yes. I'm Nicolas Fränkel. This is my first time at Øredev. I've been a consultant in different positions, all of them technical, developer, team leads, architect, solution architect for 17 years. Some of you are not much older than that. Then I became dissatisfied. Well, I already was a bit dissatisfied about how projects are led, because when you are a consultant, you are not supposed to be invested in your customer's project, but I was. And when the customer didn't listen to me, I was super disappointed, and it was frustrating. So now I go to conferences, and if you don't listen to me afterwards, that's fine. I will never know about it. I don't know about Sweden. I didn't speak in Sweden for a couple of years for whatever reason. So this is the mandatory warning in some countries. I just warn people that there is some controversy, that they might be offended, and in that case, please leave the room immediately, because I don't want to offend you, obviously, nor you. It's just that, well, I'm French, so we are a bit controversial. I come to you today because I have a problem. And the problem is that currently in our industry, there are good developers and bad developers. The good developers, they are doing microservices. Who here is a good developer? Hey, don't be afraid, come on. I know we are in the Nordics, but don't be shy. Okay, so about half the room counting the people who are too shy. And then there are bad developers. Bad developers don't do microservices, by definition. And that's my problem in the moment. I want to challenge that assumption. I want to understand, why do we come to this sad state, and perhaps offer alternatives to microservices. So this is the definition of microservices by Sir Martin Fowler. If you have a problem with the definition, bring it to Sir Fowler, not to me. I'm not responsible. I have no liability. I won't read it, but I assume that you are familiar with it. And in the same article where it defines what are microservices, which is already quite a few years old, he goes on to describe all the characteristics of microservices. And people who raise their hand would probably recognize all their characteristics here. And I need to find the light somewhere. Here, okay, it will be here. Componentization via services, it's the basics of microservices, organized around business capabilities, blah, 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 blah. Products, not projects. Products have a start date, and they have a recurring budget each year. Projects have an end date, and so the budget comes from the start date to the end date. And probably you will run out of budget and ask for more, but that's not the issue there. So among all the people who raised their hands saying they were doing microservices, who is doing products? You are not so sure. Now, either it's, yes, we are doing products because we have no end dates, or no, we are doing project because there is an end date. Perhaps there is an intermediate step, but I don't see how it's Schrödinger's cat, right? If you don't look at it, it can be both. But as soon as you start to look at it, it needs an answer. Okay, still, I see there are many people saying they are doing products, so you are still good developers so far. As I mentioned, I've been doing that stuff for some time. You see, I still had dark hair. And when the microservices craze started, every speaker who came on stage and talked how great microservices were, they were super keen on talking about Conway's Law. Who here has never heard of Conway's Law? One person, two persons? Okay. Three. Okay, which is good. So the idea of Conway's Law is that your communication structure directly influences your architecture. And so because we live in a world where this is our communication structure, UI specialists, middleware specialists, and DBAs, we have a three-tiered architecture. We didn't invent the three-tiered architecture, this is just the reflection of the communication structure. Henceforth, if you want to have microservices like this, you need to have autonomous, independent teams. Among the people who raise their hands doing microservices, who have products and not projects, who is organized around this hierarchy? Still a couple of hands, which is better and better each year. Great. But we are progressing. And AWS was the poster child for microservices because they said, we want to organize ourselves around two pizzas team, which is good because you don't need to say a definite number. Depending on the size of the pizza, of the country, you can eat more or less or whatever. But the problem is most of the organizations, they are organized like on the left and not organized like on the right. And in order to migrate your organization from the structure on the left to the structure on the right, you need the help of this person. Who is this person? Who? Yeah, Nordics, right? In Southern Europe, everybody would raise their hand, but here it's just like resounding silence. This is the middle manager. Look, it's obvious, he has a tie, he has a suit. Nobody here has a tie and a suit, so I assume nobody is a middle manager. Or you just don't want to pretend you are technical. So this person, you need their help to migrate your hierarchy, your structure. The problem is that at the top of this team, there is a middle manager. At the top of this team, there is a middle manager. At the top of this team, there is a middle manager. Where are the middle managers in this structure? Is there any middle manager here? Yeah. You feel a bit alone, right? Okay. Remember about like me being offensive and you can walk away, right? So don't take it personally. It's just my experience. So my experience with middle managers, first I need to state that I had a couple of good middle managers in my life. Couple of them. Really. Most of the middle managers were paid a huge sum of money to approve my vacation requests. Rings a bell, right? To be the proxy of my raise every year. And when I say the proxy is because, well, they are just handing you, this is how much you get. You cannot negotiate, right? It's already done. And to do a lot of reporting which could be automated. Again, good managers do a lot more, but most of them don't. So you need the help of those people who will be made irrelevant on the structure on the right. So if you don't start with autonomous team, it's really, really hard. So in real life, microservices are only addressed from a technical point of view. And it fails every time because some like high technical figure inside the company, the CTO or a very like influent architect reads about microservices and all the good sides of microservices, and they decide we will do microservices and solve all of our problems. So they do microservices, and of course, it doesn't solve any problem. Now you've got more problems, and they are not stupid. They see it, so they leave with microservices on the resume. And who will maintain this mess? Probably you. So why are people so keen on doing microservices where obviously it's not a good fit for most organizations? Martin Fowler, again, cites three main benefits: strong module boundaries, technology diversity, and independent deployment. So let's see each of them in turn to see if it's a real reason to do microservices. Strong module boundaries. Well, obviously, if you completely separate your code base, if you have independent deployments, you cannot have like this ball of mud with dependency from every package to every other package. It's the basics. Now you could object that why do some people do microservices and monorepo? I have no clue. You should ask them. Really, I cannot understand it. But if you separate everything strongly, yes, you cannot draw undue dependencies. But I'm afraid that is akin as if I said, okay, I want, because I write with my right hand, I want to learn with my left hand, so I will cut my right hand. It will probably work, but there is a downside. There is a huge trade-off that I'm not willing to make. And for strong module boundaries, depending on your tech stack, you might have lots and lots of options. I come from the Java stack, the JVM. There is gmolecules that can check your dependency. There is SonarQube where it can check the dependency between your packages. And in every tech stack, there are dedicated options. So this is not reason enough to move to microservices. Technology diversity, like everybody loves diversity. In IT, everybody should be diverse, right? So who here is a Java developer? Great. Kotlin developer? Rust developer? Great, one Rust developer. So I come from a Java background. As I mentioned, I love Kotlin, but then recently I tried to learn Rust, and I believe Rust rocks. So I come as a consultant to your Java organization, and I make my own Rust microservice. Perhaps I could even convince one or two of you to work on this microservice with me, so you learn Rust as well. But then, as the previous CTO, I just leave because, hey, somebody pays me more, right? I'm a mercenary, so I don't care again about your project. And who will maintain my Rust microservice? You again. And if you are a single technology shop, you know how hard it is to hire a developer who knows a stack. If you are a Java shop, it's hard to hire a Java developer. If you are a .NET shop, it's hard to hire a .NET developer. Now imagine you need to hire somebody who knows different stacks and train them in the stacks they don't know. Diversity is not a benefit in this case. It's a nightmare. So instead of having a more or less homogeneous architectural landscape across all your services, you have something that you don't know how to recruit anymore. If every Rust developer has left your company, how you will recruit a new Rust developer? It will be quite hard. And don't try to explain to me, yeah, but we are recruiting for potential or whatever. Yeah, you still want the person to deliver at some point, right? And the sooner the better, because, well, we are not living in fantasy land. So I don't think this is a good enough reason to migrate to microservices. Independent deployment. So here is a very schematic, project timeline. specification, implementation, deployment. The lead time is the implementation and deployment. This is where we have some leverage. The specification, we have no leverage. It depends a lot on the business. If they are not reactive, we cannot improve this, but we at least should be responsible for implementation and deployment. So perhaps there is something there. So again, I mentioned that I have, I'm not old, I have a bit of experience. We had release in our days, right? We didn't release every day because it was painful, it was not possible. We released by release trains 4 times a year. Who still is still on release trains? Sucks, right? Yeah, it happens. And the problem of release trains is that, well, if you miss the deadline, your code needs to wait until the next train, which in general is 3 months afterwards. And guess what? The business is not super happy about having their feature delivered 3 months after the planned date. So we are very smart people as a species and especially as developers, so we adapt. There was one reason you could still ship your code across or between release dates. Do a critical bug fix. You know where I'm going, right? Hey, let's just ship something with critical bug fixes, and so we can respect the deadline and still ship it a bit afterwards. We are very creative, right? Working around stupid limitations. That's how we did for many, many years, and it works. One of the big advantages, or suppose so, of microservices is that it is said that it's impossible to ship daily with Monolith because you cannot test all the features of the monolith, right? So you do release trains. On the opposite, proponents of microservices will tell you, hey, if we just deploy the microservice, we just test the microservice. And the big hidden assumption here that nobody talks about is if you deploy the microservice, it won't have any ripple effect on any of the dependency deployed, which is a huge assumption. Because the same could be said, if I deploy a monolith and I only touch one package, I could only test this package. So, big hidden assumption there. I leave it up to you to think about it. And my experience is that if you have worked a couple of years on a single project, you realize very, very fast that some parts, they change very frequently or randomly. And some parts are very, very stable. That's the parts you actually don't need to deploy, but as a monolith, you deploy them anyway. In general, the reason is business reason, but also it can be legal reasons. Guess what? It's not a new concern. We already had it in the past. And for that, we had rules engines. Who has heard about rules engine before? Interesting. Half the room. I think that's one of the highest percentage I've ever seen. So the idea of rules engine is that you deploy once a dedicated piece of software where actually you can change the rule, which is like another piece of code, directly in production. Yes, there is such thing that you can change a piece of code in production without a really proper deployment release. So the idea is that you leave the business changing the rule whenever they want and have all the responsibility if there is a bug. To be honest, I'm not saying this is the solution. I'm just saying that it is what we did before. Once, I never worked on rules engine, but once I had a colleague where the customer had required to have a rule engine so that they could change the formula of, I think it was a computation of social insurance or something, and they wanted to be independent of IT. They didn't want every time there was a legal change to ask IT to deploy it because they knew it would take ages. So I read the formula and I thought, interesting. I didn't understand it because I was not like knowledgeable in the business area. And I'm sure that no business person could have changed it without any software experience. It was really, really pain to read. So again, it's not a solution, it's an option. So my idea is that, hey, we can isolate the quick changing part of a monolith and then chop it to a rule engine, to a microservice, to a serverless function, to anything. I don't care. Who here has read the book of Chris Richardson about microservices in Java? One person. I believe it's like the reference book if you want to do it in Java. I bought it, I started to read it, and at half the book, I put it back on my shelf and say, nobody is crazy enough to implement everything. It goes everything by the book. Really, it's really very exhaustive. It's impossible. You need to do so much without delivering a single unit of business value that it's crazy. And there is a companion website where he explains some patterns. One of them is strangling the monolith, which comes from the fixed strangler pattern by Martin Fowler, where it does the same for a piece of software. And his idea is if you start with a monolith, you can chop like features bit by bit until your 2B architecture is just microservices. And it's very good if you think that this is the target architecture. But if all the parts of your monolith are stable but one or two services, why you don't just stop there and be happy with it? Why do you need to move every of your feature to microservice? Why? For example, in a web application, you could have a monolith and some of the calls could be handled by the API gateway and forwarded to the monolith, and some calls to the chop part. And again, I don't have any preference to the way you implement the chop part. My usual example is e-commerce. I've worked in e-commerce, and I worked with a very, I wouldn't say a very good platform, but the best platform there was at the time. And it was super, super flexible. So it came with a pricing engine, and it came with pricing rules. Guess what? We always had to add new pricing rules because the business was super creative. Like usual pricing rules are, okay, if you buy this and this, you get X%. If you buy X this and this, you get the third product for free. But what about if you buy this and this, no shipping cost? Okay, we need to implement it, and so on and so forth. So my idea, now I will have a demo, is to chop the pricing engine. Let's check. So here I have two options. The one is a monolith with server-side generated pages. The other is more of a client server with a REST API. Which one do you want? The first one, server-side generated? Raise your hand. Client-server API? A bit more. And the rest don't care or are sleeping or are from Sweden. Okay, that's fine. It's fine, you know, I'm French, again, you don't choose. Okay, so I will check out this one, and then I will start and explain it because it takes a bit of time to Docker Compose up. Okay, great. And now it has decided, that's very funny, I don't know how, I'm on the power plug, but still it has decided to save me resources, so it doesn't start right away. I hope it will get better. So here is my Docker Compose application. I have API 6. I'm working on the API 6 product, so it's an API gateway. API 6 relies on etcd, which is a distributed key value store. And here I have my application, the backend, and here I have my front end, and here I have my database. I mean, that's nothing really complicated. I hope it has started. Yes, it has started. So the first thing I need to do, because I just have started everything, is I need to configure the API gateway. So here I create 2 routes. The basic route, everything will be sent to the front end, but if it starts with /API, it will be sent to the back end. So far, so good. And here I have my amazing application. I still can use Bootstrap even though I'm not a developer anymore. So here I can add stuff to my cart, and here I will reload the page. And so here I am asking for the version, which is 1.2. And here I have checkout. The checkout does the following. I'm able to request both the content of the cart with every line and the total price, right? So how is it? So I'm sorry, it's in Kotlin. I need to choose a technology, and this is the ID, is here I have the pricing. The pricing is very simple. Here I just have a single function, and I'm just adding everything. So this is what I want to be able to release more often. So the first thing I need to do is I need to make it a route. At the moment, it's not a route. At the moment, it's just an inside call when I return the cart. So there is this checkout view where I return the content of the cart and the price of the cart. I will shut down everything. Last time I tried to do it live, but it didn't work, so I need to shut down everything, and I need to get on the next stage where I make it a no, what did I do? No. Here. So now I've created a pricing route. Sorry. Here. So now I have a dedicated pricing route. So now it has stopped. I will run it again. Down. Up. Okay. And so it's a bit different now, because now I first will ask for the content of the cart, and then with the content of the cart, I will send it to the pricing route, and the pricing route will compute. But what I don't want to do is to have the client making 2 requests instead of 1, because from a performance point of view, it's not a great idea. So I will do that on the API gateway side. So now it's a bit more complicated. I still have the first 2 routes, so I will run them. Normally it should be okay. I have the first 2 routes here and here, so this hasn't changed. But now when I call for checkouts, I will have a dedicated plugin that actually first will do the request to checkout itself and then to the pricing. And the price right now is just I call the backend. I'm having this explicit specific route just to set the content to application JSON, because otherwise it doesn't work. But for the the idea is that you make the two calls from the API gateway. So the client goes to the API gateway, and the API gateway does the pipelining of the request. So now if I go back, it should be version 1.3. It's still the same. So the front end hasn't changed. And now if I go on the card and I go here and I reload, from the point of view of the client, nothing has changed, right? But as you have seen, now I have two calls, one for the content of the card and then with the content of the card for the pricing. And now, if you are at this stage, it's super easy. The next step is you just need to configure the API gateway so that instead of going to the backend, the last route, the one that goes for the pricing, goes to something else. And here I decided to use a serverless fast function. But again, as I mentioned, it's one solution among many. And now if I refresh, it might be a bit slower. You see the little turtle here. And here you see it comes from Azure. The only thing that I had to do was actually to create a pricing function in here JavaScript, because Azure doesn't allow me to do something that I know better than JavaScript, and to deploy the same code. And now every time I want to change the pricing, I just go to Azure and I modify it, and I keep my monolith. So this is just one example implementation of what I said before. You keep everything. At the next release, you can remove the date code. And the next release can be in 3 months. You don't care. And that's all, folks. So this is exactly what I've showed you. The first route goes to the front end, the second route to the back end. The third route does both going to the back end and gets back to Apache API 6 to call the pricing, and then it goes to the FAS. Thanks a lot for your attention. I think I'm on time. You can follow me on Twitter, even though I think like Elon killed Twitter. You can follow me on Mastodon. I'm trying to also do the same stuff on Blue Sky. If you are interested about the demo, this is not this one. Sorry, I have an issue with that. It's GitHub, sorry, and Fränkel, and it's called Chop Monolith. So in general, I use Bitly so that I can check how many people check the demo actually. But in that case, I won't be able to know. And in case you were interested in Apache API 6, though you can do it with any other API gateway, you can have a look at api6.apache.org. I have 1 minute for question, perhaps. Who is the time master? 5 minutes for question. Amazing. So now I have bitched enough about the Nordics that nobody dares to ask a question, right? Come on, who wants to be the first? Who is not from the Nordics here? Okay, do you have a question? It's fine, I'm joking. No worries, you don't need to find a question. Yes? Oh yeah, thanks.
So where do you think we are in like 5 years? I see. So the hype of the microservices, and now we're starting to feel the pain of what we thought the ideas, a lot of these principles, and a lot of the heavy projects that I've been the one that has started, and I left and I started somewhere else. So I feel really guilty for some of my own customers. It's the nature, but at the same time, so the pendulum is continuously swinging back and forth. To some degree, if you have been around for trends over the last years, so the monolith it will never go away, right?
I hope so. The problem is not about monolith or microservices. The problem is our industry. Who here has an engineering or scientific degree? Like nearly all of them. The problem is, despite this, we are like worse than TikTok influencers. We have actually no critical mindset. We are not able to say, hey, look, they did this in their context. Probably in my context, it doesn't work. What happens right now is we see Google or Amazon or Facebook who have completely different problems, who tell about their solution, and we think that by doing the same, we will be as successful as Google or Amazon or whatever. This pendulum you are talking about, it will never stop until we, as an industry, stop chasing the latest trend. Some of you said, we are doing microservices, we have this organization, and it's perfect. If you have the organization to do microservices, if it benefits you, then be my guest. That's perfect. What I'm ranting about is no critical mindset, just adopting a solution because others have done it. I don't know if you are familiar with the term cargo culting. Cargo culting comes from a real experience. So it was in World War II, and well, in the Pacific, there was a war between Japan and Americans, and some people on these islands had never seen anybody else in their life. They were living in primitives, tribes, doing their stuff, being happy about it. And they noticed like big birds of metal flying and delivering goods. And they saw the control tower. And they thought, the hell, we will also build our own control tower to attract big birds with goods. But since they didn't have the technology, they built like towers of wood. Did it work? Not really. We are akin to those ingenious tribes, believing that by adopting the pattern, we will get the same benefits, but without any understanding of the whys. So if you like get something out of this talk, is please get back to your engineering roots, and when you see something, when you read something, please apply your critical thinking. And of course, it's good to experiment, because we are not doing mathematics, right? It's much more flexible than that. There is much more uncertainty. But you can experiment and try, okay, I will try this. What benefits do I get? What are the drawbacks? What are the costs? Short-term, long-term. And apply your engineering education, your scientific education to your practice. Other questions? Sorry, it was a very long answer. Yes. Sorry, you was first, but you will be next. There are two questions. Scalability. Okay, so I didn't mention scalability, again, because most of you are not working on such scale. And actually, going from an intra-process call to an HTTP call will decrease your performance by 1, 2, 3 orders of magnitude. So these scalability argument, I don't buy it if you are not Google scale. Stack Overflow is probably handling a lot more traffic than most of you, and is not going microservices at all. They are still on a regular monolith with a lot of cache, agreed. It depends on the use case, but they're not using it. So scalability is not the real reason. However, in my experience, scalability of the team is the reason to move to microservices. And again, we get back to organizational issue, not technical at all. At some point, I was working on Nespresso, you know, the coffee, what else, George Clooney. They wanted me at first, but finally they decided on George. Look, I could look, I have gray hair and the French class. Anyway, it goes a bit further than what I intended. And we were like 70 developers. I shouldn't have said that I look like George Clooney, the guy is jealous. We were 70 developers working on the same code base. And it started to get a bit unwieldy. So for me, in this context, the reason to move to microservices is scaling the team. But then you don't need to go to microservices, you just split the code base in two. And it's good enough. Because again, microservices means more HTTP calls, decreased performance, and more issues to coordinate, like, hey, what about transaction, whatever. So I answered one of your questions. I will get to this gentleman, and then I will back to the second question if nobody has other questions.